Greetings, National Digital Forum whānau. So first of all, sir, I'm going to have to apologise. I've got a slightly scratchy throat, but I can promise you it's not COVID related, and hopefully I'll get that sorted soon. I've just been reflecting on previous experiences with NDF. I was on the council or the convening group that did the conference back in 2006 through to 2008, was the conference convener back in 2007. I'm just thinking about what's changed in those 15 years since I was last standing in front of this group, or sitting in this case, no longer out there in Te Papa or in the big conference facilities where we normally have these events. So it feels a bit more cosy, and it feels a bit weird being in my spare room doing this. But I was thinking about the changes that have happened in the last 15 years. What was really concerning us 15 years ago was how we looked at the challenges of web technologies, how we started to do digitization, and that just seems a very long time ago now. Now we think about the rise of the iPhone, social media coming in into use. And back then, even Web 2.0 was still being kicked around in a bit of a twinkle in the eye. And way before we got the usual conference stuff around blockchain and the other cloud kind of technologies that have come into being in the eye line for the community and the challenges that we face. But some challenges still remain. The challenges of tight resources, the challenges of getting out to key customers, the challenges of working with a very difficult political environment. We start to think about how we serve our customers, how we serve our communities, how we serve our nation, and how we serve our profession. A lot of those things haven't changed. And one of the things I really want to talk about was the opportunities that we now have in this post-internet, post-Web 2.0, post-social media world. So there's lots of challenges and opportunities for archives in this rapidly evolving technological and bicultural environment. There's certainly the post-custodial conundrum, and heritage professionals are grappling with the compliance, data sovereignty, and risk management that's now presented to us in a rapidly iterating world of constantly changing platforms, cloud services, online apps. How do we deal with those to meet the expectations and increasing expectations of our customer base? How do we harness data modeling, metadata standards, machine learning, artificial intelligence with the sort of things that we've always been good at, the traditional information skills such as content classification, diplomatics, natural language processing, ontological design, and understanding the longevity that we need when it comes to the creation of information over time. And what I would recognise in my experience of working with technology professionals over the last 10 or 15 years of my career is that over the three key planes of information and data transmission, what we have been pretty good at is the cultural plane, being able to cross data, across cultures, across languages, and increasingly so with bringing Te Ao Māori world views into how we do information and data management, and presenting that information in different cultural, epistemological viewpoints. But the second great plane is through geography. And of course, the internet, the cloud, these kind of technologies have allowed us to transmit information, archives, records, art across all the geography, across the whole planet. So the technologies have been pretty good at moving stuff through cultures, at moving stuff through the geography of our planet. But the third great plane of information transmission is the temporal plane, and that's moving information through time. And that's where I feel that records managers, archivists, heritage professionals, documentary professionals in general have that viewpoint that our technologist colleagues don't. That's something unique that we can bring to the party, and it's a real opportunity for us to work with that broader context to show the value that we have and that we can bring, along with ontology skills and those other things that we as archives professionals have been great at for hundreds of years, and has only really been rediscovered by our technology partners in recent times. And we know that much of our legislation, policy and regulation still comes at us from a paper paradigm. Our policies or standards or approaches aren't really baked in for a digital world. And we know that archives and records in the data creation environment are often an afterthought, never mind the challenges that we have with Te Ao Māori expectations for data and information, for sovereignty, for residency, for control, and for transmission through time and through culture. The cloud services and online apps bring an immediacy, but also a rapidity of change and a lack of concentration on that long-term temporal view. And that's a real challenge for us. How do we capture what's often ephemeral in this world for a long-term perspective that we as heritage people need to bring to bear to ensure that that data and information and the world and our culture is being able to be captured and transmitted through time. The paradigm is constantly shifting. And we know that with artificial intelligence and automated decision making, much of what makes it into our cultural realm is based on a certain amount of opaqueness, with built-in human biases from, the pale, stale and male humans that are teaching the machines, and the lack of explainability of the policy and the rules that comes with that automated decision making. How do we, as heritage professionals, capture a true and accurate picture of our culture, of the decision making, and of the world in which we live? Because of course many organisations now are outsourcing a lot of that decision making to big, often American based corporates, and losing some of that local decision making, local nuance, and the control around the decision making and around how we decide what is captured and what makes it into our cultural realm and what's kept for future generations, to be able to understand, looking back, what this world was like. And it's really challenging for us to understand how we react to those challenges and opportunities. But what I think we can do is we can look at opportunities as Google did back in the 90s and Amazon did and Facebook did, is to standardise their data models or data standards, get a really good grasp on our ontology designs so that we can implement data management for archives at scale and in the cloud, and a potentially completely post-custodial model. And archivists and records managers are well trained in ontological thinking, content classification and information modelling. We've been doing this for a long time. Way back when the Sumerians were impressing, metadata tools and metadata wrapping on the original clay tablets, baking them when they got to final versions, wrapping them in new metadata layers of clay for version control, and putting stamps in to ensure that there was authenticity and security on that data and on that information, so that we knew it was a true and accurate reflection of what they were thinking and what they wanted to record back then. So how do we do that in that technological world? If you think back at Socrates, when he was looking at ontology, and that world archivists have brought right through, through the 12th and 13th centuries into the modern age and the modern thinking, and really right into the 20th century of subject-based headings and understanding through context and through subject and through that ontological relational thinking, that the technologies have taken us a step backwards with Linnaean views of hierarchical thinking and data models. We can bring that thinking that we've had for a very long time back into the current epistemological models and thinking, to try and make sure that the data that's created now and the records that are created now are fit for purpose for the future age. And I'm really excited about the opportunities that we can have with machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to recalibrate and attribute a lot of the lost context, the meta tagging, and the subject attribution that's been lost in that rush to more faster delivery of data, and getting us away from retaining context, retaining meaning, and retaining data over time, and keeping that context and meaning inherent in the data models and data structures, so that we can understand that context and that data and our cultural and organisational environments going forward, so that future generations can understand what we were trying to put across and what is accurate and what is true in this fast-moving technological environment in which we live. And of course, how do we start to make that decision making and it not being made by big US companies? Because of course, data sovereignty is a big issue for us. There seems to be a drive for data residency, which of course doesn't give you sovereignty. If it's a US company, you're always under US law. So residency and sovereignty and control are really big topics, particularly in a bicultural Maori ontological and cultural model, that, you know, if we have to do all of our data models and we have to manage all the way our data is created according to US law and according to US data models, then how much genuine control do we have, and how do we start to bake that in and push back and give true New Zealand contexts to how we do things, and move away from, I guess, a certain amount of cultural imperialism that comes with those big companies running how we create and manage information, because that has to colour the way it's created and the way it's captured and the way it's held, and of course how then it's managed through time for future generations. So how do we bring our thinking and our skills to bear to make sure that we give that New Zealand Aotearoa flavour to the world in which we live for future generations? So, I mean, I think about how can we grab a lot of that really badly shaped data that we want to bring through for future generations, how we can start to bring rules as code into the data models and retention and disposal artifacts that we create. So why aren't we doing that as schema to give out to government departments, for example, or to third-party cultural institutions, so that our metadata and our context is captured by design from the very beginning, through legislation, through schema, and through machine consumable classification and metadata models? Or how can we even retroactively reapply that context through putting, you know, really badly structured data into graph databases, running Sparkle queries across it, and using machine learning to reattribute and retrofit those information management controls into those existing data systems through back-end processing to attribute that missing data, so that we can have true and accurate understanding of where we want, of what we want to capture for future generations. So how do we do that? Natural language processing, ontology, and standards as data models. How do we move to that post-custodial model in the cloud, where we can utilise these technologies and start to build in that temporal longevity to what we want to create? How can we think about repatriation and genuinely controlling our own data and our own future and our own cultural epistemological approaches into that data and into that modelling within the New Zealand context? So that for me is the challenge and the opportunity of where we are within New Zealand as archivists, records managers, particularly as digital archivists, digital curators. How do we start to make that step into being proactive and reactive? But I think we've got the tools to do it. So that's, I think, where it's really exciting, the fact that we can start to do auto classification, auto capture of data from handwritten documents, from deep data, and bring the skills that we have into the modern era to be relevant again, and make sure that we are part of the modern data environment, cloud environment, and technology environment, so that we remain relevant and that we retain the information, archives, data, culture, context, and start to build a post-colonial world for our information and an Aotearoa New Zealand context, and retain our culture, our thoughts, our data, and our thinking for future generations. So it's a lot to pack into 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Hope to speak to you all in person and see you soon.